They thought he was just another passenger, humiliated him in front of everyone. But what they didn't know is that he owned the power to bring the entire airline to its knees. For more stories like this, subscribe to Simply Stories. They thought he was just another passenger. The black man stood near the gate, quietly waiting as first-class boarding was announced. He wore a plain navy blazer over a white shirt, shoes polished but not flashy, and carried a sleek leather briefcase. Nothing about him screamed wealth, but there was something grounded and composed in the way he stood arms. Relaxed, gaze steady. Didn't fidget with his phone or try to cut in line. He waited his turn like everyone else. And yet the moment he stepped forward and handed over his ticket, the tone shifted. The airline staffer scanned the boarding pass, then paused too long. She looked him up and down, her brows slightly raised, and then looked back at the screen, as if something had to be wrong. She didn't smile. She didn't welcome him aboard. Instead, she tilted her head and said, "Sir, can you step aside for a moment?" He blinked once, calmly, and stepped aside without argument. He'd flown hundreds of times before. This wasn't new. But the air had changed around him. Other passengers began to glance over. A middle-aged couple clutched their bags a little closer. Two men in suits exchanged smirks. A teenager started filming with her phone. The staffer stepped away and whispered something to a colleague, who disappeared into a side door. Moments later, two uniformed security officers approached. They didn't smile either. "Sir," one said, "we need to verify your ticket and identification again. Please come with us." He handed over both without hesitation. His tone was even controlled. "Everything's in order. I have a confirmed seat in 1A. The officer barely looked at the documents before asking, "How did you purchase this?" "Ticket." He looked at them without blinking. "Online. It's through my company's travel account." There was no apology, no explanation, a lonely silent suspicion that clung to the air like fog. The other passengers were now openly staring. The teenager had moved in closer, still filming. The man remained calm. His voice didn't rise. His shoulders stayed relaxed. But still, they began walking him away from the gate, toward the security office. He wasn't even allowed to speak with a manager as he was escorted down the terminal. The whispers followed. "Did you see that? What did he do? Was it fake? He didn't look like first-class material anyway."
Not one
person stepped forward. Not one asked a question in his defense. The ones who looked uncomfortable mostly looked away. The ones who enjoyed the show kept watching. In the back hallway, he was placed in a gray room with a thin table and plastic chairs. The officers reviewed the ticket again and mumbled something about irregularities and internal checks. But no one explained what the issue really was. He wasn't asked if he had luggage on board. No one offered water. No one apologized. For the delay, after 15 minutes, one officer returned and said, "You're free to go." There was a mix-up. "You can rebook at the front desk." The man stared at him. Not with anger, but with something sharper, something final. He stood up, brushed the front of his jacket, and picked up his briefcase. He didn't ask for a supervisor. He didn't demand compensation. He just looked the officer in the eye and said, "This will cost you more than you know." And with that, he walked out quietly, without a raised voice, without a single scene. Back at the gate, the flight had already boarded. His name had been removed from the manifest, his seat given to someone else. The plane door was closed. Staff had gone back to their usual routines. The incident was dismissed as handled. What none of them knew was that the man they had just pulled off the plane wasn't a regular passenger. He wasn't even just a wealthy businessman. He was the CEO of one of the most powerful corporate funding groups in the country. His company held massive long-term investment deals with the airline deals that stretched across technology, logistics, and international expansion. While they were busy questioning whether he belonged in seat 1A, they had just yanked out the foundation of their own future. He didn't shout. He didn't warn them twice. But his silence wasn't forgiveness, it was preparation. A quiet storm had just been triggered in that airport hallway, and the ripple would soon grow into something the airline wouldn't forget. The security room was small, dimly lit, and deliberately sterile, designed more for discomfort than dialogue. The man sat silently at a metal table, hands folded neatly, expression unreadable. Across from him, to airport personnel, avoided eye contact. There was no explanation, no acknowledgement of the humiliation he'd just endured. One officer reviewed his documents yet again, murmuring vague phrases like routine verification and standard procedure, while the other stood stiffly by the door as if expecting trouble that never came. But the man wasn't there to argue. He had no intention of giving them the drama they were silently preparing for. He knew better. He'd lived this before, and he understood power in a way they never would. They held him there for nearly 30 minutes, without offering water, without updating him on his flight status, and without a single word of regret. The room was filled with heavy silence, broken only by the occasional scratch of a pen or the quiet shuffling of papers, none of which needed any more scrutiny. Everything was in order. His boarding pass was valid, his ID was valid. The seat was paid in full, booked under a corporate account with platinum privileges. But still, they stalled. When they finally released him, it wasn't with an apology but with a clipped sentence. "You're free to go. There's been a misunderstanding." As if the damage wasn't already done, he walked out of the terminal without looking back. His stride was calm, but every movement was deliberate. The cool evening air hit his face as he stepped outside. He didn't rush, he didn't fume. He simply reached into his coat pocket, pulled out his phone, and made a single call. His voice was low, steady. "I need legal on standby. Call the general counsel. Tell them it's time to reevaluate our transport partnerships." The voice on the other end responded immediately, no questions asked. From the back seat of his black car, he sent a message to his executive team. Meeting at 8 a.m. mandatory, no exceptions. Then he sat back, gazing out the window as the city lights passed. The calm in his eyes wasn't detachment, tight was calculation. He didn't need to post about it. He didn't need to yell or go viral. His influence didn't live online. It lived in boardrooms, contracts, and capital real leverage. But while he stayed quiet, the world did not. By midnight, footage from the airport had hit social media. A blurry clip captured the moment security approached him. The young woman who had filmed it had posted, "Why are they pulling this man off first class like that? Didn't see anyone else." Questioned. It caught fire, shared, commented on, debated. But the comment sections were split. Some viewers immediately saw the bias, the injustice. Others dismissed it as standard policy, asking why he didn't just comply. The man's face was never identified. But the symbolism was clear. A well-dressed black man. Removed from a space people assumed he didn't belong in, the airline issued no statement. They likely assumed it would blow over by morning. It wouldn't by. The next day, the man sat at the head of a glass-walled conference room, watching as his team reviewed spreadsheets, contracts, and strategic partnerships. On one of the screens was the multi-billion-dollar agreement between his firm and the airline, an investment package spread across fuel innovation, aircraft upgrades, and international market expansion. His signature was on every page. Without his company's continued support, a major portion of the airline's 5-year growth strategy would unravel. He leaned back, fingers steepled. "I want a full review of our current exposure," he said. "Terminate all marketing support. Pull upcoming joint projects. Freeze long-term funding until further notice." His legal counsel nodded. "We'll need to issue formal notice by end of day. They won't take this quietly." "Not looking for quiet," he replied. "Looking for accountability." Across the room, his communications director spoke up. "Do you want us to release a statement?" "No," he said firmly. "Not yet. Let them speak first." His power didn't come from press releases or public outrage. It came from signed documents and quiet phone calls that shaped markets. And he knew the panic would come not from hashtags, but from the realization that their most important investor had suddenly gone silent. Behind the scenes, emails began to fly. Internal teams at the airline scrambled to understand what was happening. A manager noticed that a significant payment installment had been paused. An executive assistant flagged an unreturned call from the CEO's office. Soon, the airline's leadership team was on high alert. Still unaware of exactly who they had pulled off that plane, they began piecing together a trail of unanswered messages and unexpected contract freezes by midday. Reporters began picking up the story. One outlet posted an article titled, "Another Case of Profiling at 30,000 Feet." The clip from the airport had now been viewed over 5 million times. Still, there was no official comment from the man. No tweets, no interviews. Silence. But behind that silence was movement strategic. Focused. Unstoppable. What no one in that terminal knew, what security didn't know, what the staff at the gate didn't care to ask was that the man they had treated like a threat had the power to shake their company at its core. And now that very choice was being written into board memos, legal briefings, and termination letters. He wasn't interested in revenge. He was executing consequence. Not for drama, not for noise, but because sometimes silence hits louder when it comes backed by billions. He hadn't lost anything that day at the airport. They had. And by the time they realized it, the ground would already be shifting beneath them. The boardroom was silent, but humming with intensity. Floor-to-ceiling windows framed the skyline behind him, but no one was admiring the view. Everyone at the table knew why they were there. At the head, he sat poised, suit crisp, eyes locked on the digital screen as the contract flickered to life. A decade-long agreement spanning over 100 pages outlined a $4 billion funding partnership with one of the world's largest airlines. Every detail was accounted for. Fuel optimization programs, tech upgrades for sustainable aviation, elite customer perks designed exclusively for corporate clientele, and multi-market expansion plans backed by his firm's capital. It had taken years to structure. It would take him only minutes to dismantle. The legal officer scrolled to the termination clause. All eyes turned toward him. He didn't ask for a vote. He didn't need one. "Execute the termination," he said, his voice calm but final, effective immediately. A moment passed, weighty and irreversible. Then the legal officer tapped twice, signed digitally, and hit send. The silence deepened, not from hesitation, but from the understanding that what had just happened was going to ripple across the industry. The airline hadn't just lost funding, they had lost future leverage. Innovation and credibility, all in one precise blow. Within the next hour, the airline's corporate inbox received the termination letter. It was short, professional, and crystal clear. Attached were withdrawal notices, dissolution of partnership clauses, and a strict directive to halt all co-branded initiatives effective that same day. The man included a signed note from his office that read, simply, "We no longer align with your values." Within 30 minutes, the airline C-suite was in chaos. Phones rang non-stop. Executive assistants scrambled to arrange emergency calls. A hastily formed video conference was launched. Faces that normally wore corporate calm now showed panic. The name on the termination letter stunned them. The realization hit this wasn't just a client. This was the client. The one who had sat at the negotiation table 5 years ago and made their expansion into Europe possible. The one whose firm had funded their new AI-powered scheduling platform. The one whose presence on their financial statements gave other investors confidence. And now, he was gone. Desperate calls were made. One of the airline's senior executives tried to reach him directly. Another called his assistant. A third messaged his communications director offering a public apology and a promise to investigate the incident. None of the messages were answered. Instead, the airline received one reply, routed through legal channels. "The treatment I received at your gate did not reflect a one-time mistake. It reflected a culture. You treated me like I didn't belong. Now your planes will feel that absence." No press release could rewrite that sentence. No boardroom spin could soften the weight of it. Within hours, financial analysts began to notice the cracks. Word spread on Wall Street that a key investor had pulled out. Speculation brewed. Stock tickers began sliding. Journalists picked up the scent. By the end of the business day, 3 major outlets had confirmed that a multi-billion-dollar investor had terminated all dealings with the airline. None could confirm the name yet, but insiders hinted it was connected to the viral airport video still circulating online. Social media exploded. Side-by-side comparisons of the video and leaked emails began appearing on timelines. Some people, tried to defend the airline, calling it a misunderstanding. But others pointed out a trail of similar stories customers quietly profiled. Passengers removed without cause, apologies issued only after public backlash. The patterns could no longer be ignored. Back in the luxury boardroom, the man remained. Still watching, as his team monitored headlines, he didn't gloat. There was no satisfaction on his face, only resolve. What had happened to him wasn't unusual. That was the tragedy of it. But the difference this time was that the target had the power to respond, not just react. And he used that power not with rage, but with precision. The stock took a noticeable dip by closing. Investors asked questions. PR teams scrambled to form statements. The airline's legal team offered to reopen negotiations. One executive offered a personal letter of apology. Another asked to meet face-to-face. Every request was met with silence. By nightfall, the story was everywhere. News anchors debated corporate accountability. Thought leaders called it a turning point in how companies treat people they underestimate. Employees at the airline began to whisper, some ashamed, others afraid. The board called an emergency session. HR departments were flooded with internal complaints from staff, who said they'd seen this behavior before and never felt safe speaking out. But for the man who had quietly walked out of that airport, the work was already done. He didn't need to defend his dignity with words. He defended it with action. He hadn't just pulled out of a deal. He had pulled back the curtain on a system too comfortable with disrespect, too blind to the quiet cost of bias. His absence would echo through every quarterly meeting, every budget shortfall, every canceled upgrade and missed milestone, and it all began with a single boarding pass. The apology came 3 days too late. It was posted across the airline's social media accounts just after sunrise, a plain white background, a company logo, and a short block of carefully worded text. It referred to the incident as an unfortunate misunderstanding, apologized to the affected passenger without naming him. It emphasized the company's commitment to inclusivity and mentioned a pledge to review internal protocols. It was bland, measured, and instantly rejected. The comments flooded in within minutes. Words like cowardly, insincere, and performative were repeated like a chant across platforms. No ownership, no names, no accountability. The backlash grew quickly. Hashtags surged. Hashtag Fly with Respect began trending in over a dozen countries. Then came hashtag Ground the Bias, hashtag We Saw the Video, and simply hashtag Not Boarding. Influencers, CEOs, athletes, teachers, activists' voices from every corner of society reposted the footage, calling out the systemic pattern the airline tried so hard to bury. They weren't just angry about the one incident. They were angry because it confirmed what too many already knew, that if someone as powerful and composed as that man could be treated with such casual disrespect, what did that mean for those with less privilege, less leverage, fewer eyes watching? Then the silence broke again, but not from him. Whistleblowers from inside the airline began speaking out. Anonymous posts popped up on forums and internal boards. Flight attendant wrote about watching a black mother and her child get moved to the back of the plane after booking priority seats. A former gate agent shared that she'd been pressured to recheck tickets from passengers who didn't match the booking profile. Old stories, long buried, began resurfacing. An internal email leaked one that appeared to show a manager dismissing a prior complaint of racial profiling as a training issue with no need to escalate. The airline's leadership scrambled. Press conferences were announced. A new apology followed this one in video form. The CEO, who had remained silent until now, stood in front of a neutral background and delivered prepared remarks. He looked tired, nervous. He promised a comprehensive audit, expanded diversity training, and corrective measures. But no one was listening anymore. The words were too late. The consequences were already moving. Board members began demanding answers. Shareholders requested emergency briefings. The press didn't stop circling. Investigative outlets published deep dives into the airline's history, policies, complaint statistics. Lawsuits were dusted off. Class action discussions began. Inside the airline, the mood shifted to dread. Several top executives were removed quietly, their exits described as retirements or new opportunities. A full internal audit was launched, third-party, external, and far-reaching. Human resources was turned inside out. The brand's reputation, once strong, was now radioactive. Meanwhile, the man who had been pulled off that plane said nothing. He never posted, never tweeted, never appeared on the talk shows that tried to reach out. He simply let the moment grow. He understood something deeper than headlines. Sometimes silence isn't avoidance. Sometimes it's strategy. Let the weight of truth build on its own. Let the world finally hear what too many have whispered for too long. Weeks passed. The incident was still in rotation on major news outlets, but now paired with updates on the airline's unraveling. Analysts speculated on losses. The company's next quarterly earnings were projected to take a significant hit. Public trust had dropped. Competitor airlines, sensing the opportunity, began advertising their inclusive culture and customer-first policies. One even made a direct nod, posting, "Respect isn't optional. It's the ticket." And then, without warning, he was seen again. A passenger on a first-class flight from Los Angeles to Tokyo shared a photo. There he was seated comfortably, dressed in a subtle navy suit, reading quietly. The airline was not the one that had humiliated him. It was a rival, a rising competitor, known for its discretion and premium service. The post's caption read, "This is how you treat people. Quiet class, not chaos." The photo went viral in minutes. Reporters tried again for interviews. Most were declined. But one journalist, known for her integrity and long-form pieces, was granted a short, private conversation. It wasn't televised. It wasn't flashy. But the article published days later carried his words brief and measured. "I don't want revenge, I want change." But sometimes to wake a giant, you have to shake its foundation. That sentence landed with force. It wasn't a boast. It was a mirror. People quoted it, printed it, turned it into banners and slogans. It echoed because it wasn't just about one man or one company. It was about every person who had ever been made to feel like they didn't belong in a space they had earned. Every parent looked at that story and thought of their child. Every professional thought of the moment they were questioned, watched, doubted. In the weeks that followed, other industries began re-examining their policies. Companies hosted listening sessions. Corporate leaders quietly asked, "What would happen if this happened to us?" He didn't celebrate any of it. He kept working, kept building. He understood that real change takes more than one moment hit. Takes a shift in pressure and a sustained memory. The airline eventually rebranded. A new name, a new logo, a new promise that people remembered. And memory, like reputation, doesn't fade quietly. He never flew with them again. He never needed to. And in the end, as the world watched a once untouchable company bend under the weight of its own choices, one truth remained. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't demand headlines. He didn't return fire. He simply made one decision. And the foundation cracked, and shake it he did.